It is great to worship with you all. It's great to be here. I think the last time I was here, we were voting on a new lead pastor, if memory serves. And wow, did that go well, huh? Fantastic, yeah. I think your vote of affirmation was the most positive and strongest that I have seen as a superintendent in all of my career. And that's saying something because I've seen a few of those. And it's not just your affirmation. It's not just your affirmation, but I've been closely observing and partnering over these last few months. And wow, God is affirming our transition and our direction and Pastor Noah's leadership, right? And the whole deal. So, yeah, it's great to be back. It's great to be back. Yeah. I think you have the best young pastor in the Western United States. I really do. I'll just say it. I really do, yeah. And I'll tell you though, that's all great. But one of the markers that I look for in my role in terms of a staff and a lead pastor and a church family, in terms of like, are they about themselves and creating something that they love, or do they still have an enormous passion for their community and the stranger that they don't even know who needs God? And one of those markers is, are you willing to do what is enormously uncomfortable, and that's add a service? I think adding a third service is the most frustrating and hard and difficult thing that an entire church can go through. The staff is uncomfortable with it. The volunteers, it's a different routine. The congregation, it messes everybody up. And nobody, when they hear about that, goes, yeah, my Sunday morning's going to get messed up. Nobody's like, yay, right? But I watch a church family go through that process, and their willingness to engage and embrace that kind of struggle because they care about the stranger who doesn't know God and they want a place for them too. That's an indicator to me. And I'm actually going to teach and preach in a moment, so I don't want to be but I'm just going to say thank you. One of the reasons God's favor has been on this place is your continued willingness to care about people you don't know, but you love them as you do yourself. That is amazing. Keep that going. Keep that and a series of decisions. Keep that. Keep it about that, and keep it about Christ first. I have the privilege to teach on something today, and it's how God leads us in our life through really one challenge after another, and actually intentionally allows that. I don't want to be the bearer of too bad of news, but God is actually intentionally setting up challenge in your life because He has a plan that's amazing, but there'll be some challenges because you'll need to learn to rely on Him. He's going to build something in you, and I watch churches go through that, and so just grateful for what He's doing here. Can you give me a few minutes of your time, because I want to lead you through a process. It's the way in which God is building my faith. It's the way in which God built the one we're going to read about in this account in 1 Samuel 17, David's faith, from a real famous story. But it's more importantly than that, it's exactly the way God is building your faith right now. You can choose to cooperate with it or not, but it's exactly like this is how He does this. So if you'd give me just a few minutes, I want to go back through a story that almost certainly you have heard before. I never really ask audiences to raise their hands, but I'm going to break that today, because I would bet, let's just do this. Get ready to be willing to maybe raise your hand. Have you heard of the story of David and Goliath? Okay. Almost everybody. That's usually the case because it is a super well-known story. Even if this is your first Sunday in church, you probably heard the story because it's the great underdog story of all time. It's the genesis of other underdog stories, right? It is the story of one mighty warrior in a battle who's 9.5 feet tall and way more than that. He's skilled and all the rest. And it's the Bible specifically says the word scrawny. Not sure what was meant by scrawny in David's day, but it certainly wasn't super stud, right? It was like the opposite of whatever that is. And he's probably 16, 17 years old, and this scrawny no-name 16 or 17-year-old takes on the incredibly skilled, strong, big warrior, and he wins. That's the big story. If you ever went to church as a child, you heard this for sure, you know this. And yet, because you do, and because we've heard the story so much, we miss something in it that's actually more applicable to our lives. You see, the reality is, probably on Tuesday, you're not going to run into a 9.5-foot dude who wants to kill you. Probably. Maybe. You know, if you're that bad of a driver, you irritate people that badly, maybe. But probably that's not the giant. But, now more seriously, there is a Goliath coming in your life. And there is a God who wants to prepare you for that. And he's going to use the way you face that giant for the people around you and their faith in him. So the way you face the relational conflict, the bad health report, you name it, the way you face that work challenge is going to be different than the people around you, and God's going to use that in incredible ways. Some of you have children who are following in your footsteps, friends, nieces, nephews, you name it. Other people at work. This is a big deal, and God's working in your life to change you and build a bold faith in you, just like David had. So we're going to go back to that story, and I want to show you kind of the 4 ways God builds faith in us. And you can take notes about that if you want. You can process how he's doing that in your life. But I promise you, he's doing this, and you can cooperate with it just as David did. So the first way God does this is by using everyday, ordinary difficulties, challenges, things that we face, right? A doctor's appointment on Thursday, a hard conversation on Friday, saying no to dessert on Thursday. I mean, every little hard thing we're going to face this week, big, small, whatever we feel, this is how God's going to build you. Let's look in David's life first. So we're gonna walk through a little part of this where he's explaining to King Saul why it is he thinks he can take on the giant. Here's this kid talking to the king, saying, I can go take him on. The king's name is Saul. Saul, the king says, you aren't able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. Listen to David's response. He says, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he's defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. So then, Saul says to him, go, and the Lord be with you. Here's the idea. Understand this. David is tasked with being in the wilderness and taking care of the family's sheep, because he's not considered to be much, both in his family and his community. So he's got like the lowest job, and he's just this kid they sent out, okay? So his job is to watch the sheep, and a lion comes. Now, I got to be honest with you. My approach to that situation, if I'm David, would be that, hey, every business has some depreciation, right? I mean, think through this, right? You don't bat 100%, and you lose a sheep here and there. This is just how life works, and it's a lion, and you lose sheep. David's approach, though, was, hey, God's actually got a plan for my life. He's with me in all that I do, and right now I'm being tasked with a few sheep. So there's a lion and a few sheep. This is who I am. This is where I'm at in life. This is my job. This is my challenge. So I'm going to trust that God's with me. I'm going to go after a lion. Well, that's different, right? He does, and he discovers something. Actually, God affirms that. He is actually with me. He was there, because you don't take on a lion with your bare hands and win unless you learn some things, right? Right? You learn some things. Little pause for a quick story. This is, for me, this is one of the ways I've learned how to learn this, okay? So I'm afraid of high places. I'm not afraid of high places. I'm afraid of falling off of high places. Anybody join me on that? Yeah, just that's me. The place is fine as long as I knew I would be there forever, right? But I'm afraid. Okay, so, and I live in northeast Wyoming, and we have this rock that juts out of the earth called Devil's Tower, if you've ever visited that area. And people climb Devil's Tower, and I actually have a climbing buddy who climbs this regularly. And some time ago, he had been forever like, hey, Wes, you got to get over that fear of heights problem you got. You got to climb this with me. Yeah, whatever. And so we had this conversation for like a decade. And finally, one day, I'm like, okay, that probably helped my leadership to overcome a fear. Let's do this, right? And so, okay. And so me and this guy, we go to the base of Devil's Tower, and you have to take a little class. They teach you about the strength of the rope and the harness and the carabiners and the whole process. And they do it really well. And so intellectually, I'm like, yeah, as long as I'm hooked in, I'm safe. I'm good. Intellectually, I'm like, yep, thumbs up. I understand it all. I'm good. We're going to be good. And so we start climbing. And the first little bit goes okay, but then, I don't know, a third or halfway up, we get to this spot that appears to me to be like very sheer, like perfectly flat, like zero handholds, footholds, nothing. And my friend just choop, 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 right up. You know, he's about 145 pounds. He's all muscle. And it's all like in his fingers, I think, and I'm 200 and none of your business pounds, and I am not all muscle. Oh, I'm not all muscle, and what muscle I have, very little of it's in my fingers apparently. So he goes up and he has this phrase, you know, on belay on, whatever. I learned to hate that phrase throughout the day, but he'd give that phrase, and what that phrase means is it's Wes's turn to try to climb, right? That's what that phrase means. And so, and I got about halfway up that section of the climb, and I lost it. I lost all grip, and I fell. And when you fall, you know, you don't just fall like a foot. You fall quite a ways until you reach the point where you're caught. And I screamed like a first grader, I got to tell you. He said that I asked for my mother. I don't remember that specifically, but I remember just everything coming unhinged within me and being terrified. And you fall for however long, it felt like about 1,000 feet, but whatever it was, you know, you fall and it catches. You're like, oh, wait, I am alive, right? Like, who would have thought, right? And so you swing back on and you hook back, and the only thing you got to do is to try again. I fell again. I screamed again. I hooked back on. I climbed. I fell again. I hooked back on. I fell 4 times. The reason I tell that story, 4 times at that spot. I fell many times throughout the day, but fell 4 times at that spot. The reason I tell the story is because of the difference between the first fall and the fourth fall. First fall, the most terror a human being can experience is the way I would describe that. Fourth fall was kind of fun. Yeah, it was. It was kind of like, whoo, this is cool. Yep, catches you every time. Let's hook back on. I kind of, by the end of that day, was enjoying some of my falls. What changed? You see, I went into the climb intellectually, believing in stuff like strength of rope and harness and all that. But after a while, after it caught me over and over again, my gut started to agree. Yeah, you're good. And I'll tell you something. When we talk about faith in God to face the giant that's coming in your life, if you wait for the giant to learn to trust God experientially, it'll be too late. You can hear 100 sermons, 1,000 sermons. You can sing songs. You can read scripture. Those are great faith builders. Do those things. But until you take a step and actually show up at that counseling appointment, visit that doctor, start that hard conversation, do something that you think God is calling you to do that's hard, and experience God with you and learn for yourself that God is with you, your faith doesn't get bigger. So this week, like, what's on your schedule? What have you been avoiding all week or for weeks now or for months now that God's saying, no, take that step? That would honor me. That would build the faith of the people around you. Take that step. It's the first way God does it. Second way God builds our faith, and this is one of my least favorite, but he uses criticism, opposition. I pray that God would remove that from my life. I don't like it at all, but he just doesn't do that. Matter of fact, I'm convinced sometimes God adds it because it's good for me. It's good for my faith. And this is what happens. Let me read how it worked in David's life, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. But it says in 1 Samuel 17, verse 28, it says, when Eliab, David's oldest brother, this would be like kind of David's hero in life. In those days, especially, the oldest brother had an elevated, I'm an oldest brother. This is the way it should always be. But Eliab is kind of David's hero. And it says, when Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with me, and he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? With whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? You're just a shepherd boy of a few sheep. What are you doing? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. David says, what have I done? Can I even speak? And it says he just turned away to someone else. You think about Eliab for a moment. So Eliab was in Israel's army, was called to take on evil, as were all the other warriors. Philistine is this attacking, evil military that's coming at them. He's called to do this. He wakes up like all the other warriors in his tent that morning and gets around the fire, wakes up. They probably sing Kumbaya or whatever it is, get all fired up, have a great breakfast, eggs, ham, salt. Well, actually, no, they don't have ham now that I think about it, but that wouldn't be a kind of a Jewish thing. But whatever their big breakfast was, they wake up, they do their thing, right? And they get all fired up. They go out to the battle. Goliath comes out, taunts and challenges them. They'd been saying, this is the morning we're going to take him. For about 40 mornings, Eliab and all the warriors have gone out. Ooh, he's something. Not today. And they've shrunk back. And it feels okay. It feels kind of wise because everybody's doing that, right? Everybody's doing that. And then one scrawny 17-year-old from watching a few sheep comes and says, okay, if nobody, I will. It doesn't feel quite the same. So he criticized. I want to tell you something. When you take on the challenge God's putting in front of you with faith in God that he'll be with you if you do the right thing, whether that's financially, relationally, help, whatever it is, there's going to be people around you, they may be in your family, who have been shrinking back from a similar challenge. They've maybe been blaming others, blaming their circumstance, whatever it is, they've been shrinking back. And they're going to criticize you. And here's the thing. You're not going to do it perfectly. So that opens you up to even more criticism. But God's going to use that to build your faith. Let me tell you, David could have done a couple things. He could have turned and got into it with Eliab. He could have said some things to Eliab. Eliab could have said some more. And the story of this whole account could be David and Eliab, not David and Goliath. Maybe that's your story. Maybe you're engaging and the story's become you and the criticizer, not you and what God's calling you to do. This is the story of David and Goliath, not David and Eliab. Or David could have had another reaction. He could have said, you know, you're right. You're the oldest brother. you decide what happens here. I'm a shepherd kid. You're right. I shouldn't take this on. I'll go back to my sheep. And you can do that too. You can internalize criticism and agree with it and accept that as your identity. Don't do that either. Turn away and keep moving forward. Turn away and keep moving forward. You're in a group of people and you're saying, you know what? I'm going to accept responsibility for this problem. There's some stuff I can do about it. I'm going to take this step, and you're going to be with a group of people, and maybe they're not accepting any responsibility for those challenges in their life. Maybe they're not taking any steps about what's next, whatever it is, and they're all just participating in the same, spiral backwards in life. And when you say, no more, not me, I'm going to try, and I think God's going to be with me, you will get criticized. But God's going to do something inside of you if you keep moving forward. The third way he does that, the third way he builds our faith, is he has a unique process planned for every one of us to prepare us to face the unique giants that each one of us are going to face. You see, he knows your future. He knows the exact challenge he's going to put in your future. It's different than the exact challenge he's going to put in my future. And so what he's doing right now, if you'll let him, is he's using your actual life circumstances. He's using all of your stuff, the mechanical failure of your pickup, all the real life stuff he's going to use uniquely in your life to prepare you for your giants. And you're just going to be built different than I am. Your faith is going to be just strengthened in different ways than mine because we're different, and God's going to use that. So here's the story in David's life. Let's look at it from his life and then come back to us for a minute, because there's this scene in 1 Samuel 17 where the king says, okay, you want to go after Goliath? More power to you. But you're going to need some gear. And Saul would have had the only gear in their army. Very poor. He would have had the only sword, the only helmet, the whole stuff, right? The only coat of armor. So he says, you're going to need my stuff. So here it is. This is kind of one of those scenes. It says, Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him, a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword, the king's sword, over his tunic and tried walking around because he wasn't used to them. And you picture the scene. David staggers around, first time he's ever carried a sword. Again, scrawny 16, 17-year-old. He's like, I can't go in these. That's what he says. I can't go in these. I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, his shepherd's staff, and he chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with the sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. Here's what David says. The way I've been trained, the only experience I would have that would be applicable to this situation is my slingshot. That's all I got. And you can imagine the ridicule, of course, from Eliab and the guys, right? Okay, now he's going to just take his slingshot. Yeah, and David says, I know, but it's all I got. God has trained me well with a strap of leather with a pouch on it and a rock. That's all I got. Interesting fact of history. Some of you have read this. Many of you probably read about this. In David's era of time, we know that they learned that actually slingers, as they were called in David's time, slingers were the most effective way to go at armed infantry people. They figured out that, wait a minute, a rock traveling at the velocity of the, by the way, it wasn't like a Walmart rubber band thing, okay? This was a whole different thing. They would spin this thing and they would release a rock at the same velocity that we currently shoot a bullet from a .45 auto pistol. That's how fast that rock was moving, and they're known in history to be able to hit birds out of the air with this thing. This was a real deal. By the way, just a side note, God's smart. He's like, what would be the best way for a 17-year-old kid to take on a Goliath that's coming 18 months from now in his life? Well, what if he could hurl a rock into a forehead at way over 2,000 feet per second. Would that be effective? Yeah, let's do that, right? And so as everybody's ridiculing David, God and David know God's prepared him for this moment. He's got it. I want to tell you something. Whatever you're facing and whatever you're going to face, God's there ahead of you. He's getting you ready. Walk with him every day. Bathe your life in prayer. Learn about him through the scripture. And he's just going to prepare your faith. He knows what's coming. Okay? And it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the way your mom or dad did it, or your uncle or your aunt did it, or somebody else. It's going to be, you can learn from all that, but God's preparing you uniquely. Lean into God's work in your life. He's doing this. The final way that God prepares us, that God builds our faith, if you want bold faith, there's these moments when we trust publicly in key moments. I mentioned this 3 or 4 times this morning. You have people in your life, at your workplace, in your family, whatever. And God is going to build their faith by how you face the giants in your life, just as he's building your faith by watching others face key moments. So when you go to the doctor and you get news and you're not sure how, and God says, I'll be with you, and the way you face this is going to have impact for the next generation. And their faith is going to be boldened because they're going to borrow some of yours until they walk on their own. This is how God works. When I think through this, I think of a story in my young life. I was in 4th or 5th grade. When my grade school years, much of my grade school years, I attended a school that had a lot of violence in it. A lot of violence. And I would come home from school and I would report to my parents about whatever had happened that day. And it'd be something, especially in my grade school head, right? It would be something. And my dad always had the same response. I never really valued it much, I got to be honest, because his response was typically, well, what did you do for her? Did you stand up for her? Did you stand up for him? Like, wow, what did you do in that? I'm like, what did I do? I stayed as far away as I could, Dad. What did I do? Where was I? Why are we talking about me? Right? Like, where was the principal? Where was the teacher? Me? Why are we talking about me? Right? He said, well, all that stuff matters, but what did you do? Because you should have done something here. And I just think to myself, well, maybe if you were there, you could have, but I ain't doing anything in this situation. And this would be a common discussion in those years until something shifted. And I want to point out what kind of it made it shift. My family and I were driving along a country lane in those days. And as we're driving along, it was a paved road, but kind of out of town a little ways. And Dad slams on the brakes. He's driving and slams on the brakes and starts to roll his window down. In those days, we rolled our window down. And so it was rough. You kids, you just don't. I mean, we had it rough back in the day. So he's rolling his window down, and he yells out, and we start looking off the side, and there's a young guy, early 20-something guy, big dude. He has a woman by the neck, a young lady by the neck, and he's shaking her. She's bent over his. I remember today is a blue Nova. And he has her there, and he's shaking her, and it looks bad. And Dad says, stop, what are you doing? Stop right now. And it kind of startles him. A few people had apparently been driving by, nothing been done. Dad stops and yells, and the guy's kind of startled. He stands up, looks at Dad, and lets her go. She's stunned and kind of starting to stagger away. He says, let her go, leave her alone. And then I remember him saying something to her about, do you have a safe place to go, and she's kind of getting her wits back about her and starting to walk away a little bit, and the guy looks at my dad and starts to yell stuff across the road there at my dad, and I remember so vividly some of the things he said because he used words I had never heard before. These were new, very descriptive, interesting words that just weren't common in my household, okay? And so he starts to say those things, and she's starting to get a little bit away. And Dad, I remember saying something to her like, do you have a safe place to go? And she's not able to move very fast. And then I remember the guy, as he's yelling, goes back to the back of his car there, opens up his trunk. Back in the day, we used to have these big 4-pronged tire irons. Some of you remember those things, big old things. And he pulls one of those out and slams his trunk and turns around and begins to describe to my dad what he's going to do to my dad with the tire iron. Again, this guy had creativity. He had some interesting ideas, and he communicated those. Meanwhile, she's starting to get a little further away, and this is when I remember my mother getting very involved in the conversation. She's saying the right side there, and she starts to very intensely communicate a plan to my dad about what we should do next. He disagrees, and so I've got this going on. I've got that big thing coming and going on. I remember this very, very well. And finally, my dad interrupts a bit and says, I'm going to step outside. He rolls his window back up, and he says, I'm going to step outside, lock the doors, here's the keys. If something happens to me, make sure you get out of here fast. My mom intensely disagrees with this plan, okay? That'd be the nice way of saying it, and there's another communication that ensues there, but he goes ahead and steps out and shuts the door. And so, holy cow, I'm watching. Finally, this young lady's able to kind of leave or start moving away, and he's coming across the road, and he is just yelling. And I remember, I don't know if he was as big as I remember him, but I remember him being a really big guy. And he has this tire iron, and he's coming across the road, and I just couldn't breathe, right? He gets about 3.5 feet from my dad, and he just stops, and he turns around, goes back to his car, throws the tire iron back in his trunk, slams the door, does a little half donut there in the dirt beside the road, and takes off down the road the other way. And by this time, the young lady's out of sight going wherever she wanted to go. The next thing I remember is a negotiation between my parents as to whether my dad could get back in the van. So that actually took a little while. Okay, that took a little while. I think they still are discussing that moment. But he gets back in the van, drive. I think we went, as a kid, I don't remember all the details from there, but they go to a police station and the rest. I tell that story because the next day at school, my faith was a little bigger. I wasn't like superhuman or anything, but a little bolder. I was willing to say, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. I wish God would take Goliaths out of the path of churches, out of the path of Christ followers, out of, my path. But he says, no. That's the point of your existence. You and I together are going to overcome those moments, and the people around you, wow. If you go read verse 52 of chapter 17, we'll put it up here. It's amazing what happened to all the other warriors after David conquers Goliath. It says, then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and the gates of Ekron. All of a sudden, these guys who had been shrinking back said, oh, okay then, we're in. Let me just say it this way. Literally, the future is dependent upon you in front of others facing the Goliaths of your life and them watching you do that with confidence in God, that changes the world because it gives them the faith they need, and then they give somebody else. That changes the world. So don't pray that all your Goliaths will be taken away. Just pray that God, like David, will, and I know they're big. Okay, I don't mean to diminish them. I know cancer's terrifying, right? I know divorce. I know all the things we face, those hard things, overcoming those hard things, making decisions that Christ asks you to make. They're simple, but they're hard. I get it. But the future is dependent on women and men who will say, with God, he's just Goliath. And he's going to fall. He's going to fall. Because God's big. And he's smart. And he cares just as much about you and me as he cared about a scrawny 17-year-old named David. Guarantee you. Let's talk to him for a minute. God of heaven and earth, God of creation, God who sent his only begotten Son, God who formed us in our mother's wombs, and God who fills this room with his presence, who stands right next to me right now. God. God who knows my future. God who knows our future. And God who has a plan for our life, including the giants. We pray to you. We speak to you right now. And we'd love for you just to take those giants away. We know that you could. But we want our life to be the life you've planned for us. The life changes the world around us. And so, Father, we ask something different this morning. We ask that you'll be the God, Emmanuel, the God with us. In the everyday challenge of this week and the Goliath that might be coming this year, you'll be with us. And if you choose not to take away a giant, okay. Use the way we face that giant. Use it in other people's lives. Use it for your glory, because we know you can be trusted. You'll be with us, and your strength will be sufficient. So if you think one needs to stay in our path, okay. We'll face it with you. And Father, I pray for this church. I don't pray that you take the giants away from this church. I pray that your favor and blessing remain on it, so that in the overcoming of its giants, the community around would say, that God that they serve, he's the real thing. That's real. And we will put our trust in him as well. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.